Welcome to Sleep from History. Tonight we drift back into the Middle Ages, a time when people found the strangest and often most dangerous ways to entertain themselves. Imagine torches flickering in the night wind, the smoky scent of straw mixing with animal hides, the sound of horns and laughter echoing across dusty fairgrounds. That world was noisy and gloomy, like a half-light dream that smelled of hay and iron. But don't be fooled by the shimmer of banners and bonfires. Medieval life was full of disease, hunger, and war. People slept on straw that stank of manure, drank beer instead of water to avoid poisoning, and considered surviving a single winter a miracle. Here's the truth: you wouldn't last a day. Before we begin this journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy these sleepy voyages into the past. And drop your location and current time in the comments. We're gently mapping listeners from across the world. Now, let's drift into the world of medieval entertainment, raucous, bizarre, and unforgettable. You step into a summer morning of the 12th century when bright banners ripple above a wide meadow outside the city walls. The air is thick with the smell of horse sweat, damp leather, and straw, crushed under countless feet. The crowd surges, everyone straining to hear the blare of horns. This is no village fair. It is a tournament where blood glory and politics will collide. You feel the earth tremble, every hoofbeat hammering against your chest, both frightening and thrilling, like the drumroll before a dream you can't quite escape. The knights appear, armor gleaming in the sunlight. They sit tall in their saddles, war horses draped in embroidered cloth, family crests painted boldly across shields. The people roar, banners snap in the wind, and trumpets call so loud the sky itself seems to lean closer. In that instant, you realize this is the rock concert of the Middle Ages, except instead of guitars and smoke machines, they've got lances and the constant risk of a broken neck. But behind the spectacle lies a harsher truth. Nothing here is staged. Lances will splinter against shields, men will fall heavily to the ground, and bones will break. The crowd hasn't come just to cheer, they've come to see who stands and who is carried away. A strange excitement pulses through everyone as if the entire field is drunk on bloodlust. Among the whispers, one name rises again and again: William Marshall. His story is half legend, half tragedy. As a boy, he was nearly hurled from a castle wall, a hostage, threatened with death by catapult. Instead of dying a forgotten pawn, he grew into the greatest knight of his age. Now, when Marshall rides out, the crowd holds its breath and his opponents brace for impact. He lowers his lance steady as a hawk, diving on prey, striking with terrifying precision. Chroniclers call him the Michael Jordan of jousting. Except when Jordan lost, he missed a point. When Marshall lost, he could lose his life. You're still recovering from the sight when the trumpets sound again and a new ripple of tension spreads. Today, Prince Edward himself appears, the future hammer of the Scots. He has arrived with 200 knights, as if turning the tournament into his personal show. The peasants cheer, but the French lords frown. In their eyes, this is no longer entertainment, it is a contest of pride and politics. Everyone remembers how it ended. The Count of Chalon, humiliated when his son was unhorsed, flew into a rage. He spurred his horse straight at Edward. The crowd gasped, expecting disaster, but Edward seized the Count by the collar, wrenched him from the saddle, and slammed him into the mud like a wrestler. Shouts burst from the stands, half in horror, half in giddy laughter. The people had come for drama, and drama arrived in full, bloodied force. The crowd barely has time to settle before the next contest erupts. This time, it is no polite duel between two champions. It is a full melee, dozens of armored men thundering into each other in a storm of steel and horseflesh. Swords ring, shields splinter, and the air fills with the shrill cries of panicked animals. Dust rises so thick it stings your eyes, and for a moment, you can hardly tell who is winning, who is falling, and who is simply trying to breathe under the crushing weight of iron. You watch a lance snap in half and hear the sickening crack of bone beneath the roar. A knight tumbles from his saddle, his visor twisted, and you realize he is not moving. The crowd gasps briefly, then surges forward again, attention already claimed by the next clash. For medieval spectators, violence is not a flaw in the program, it is the feature. Without broken ribs, without at least one corpse to gossip about on the walk home, the tournament would feel disappointingly tame. The church thundered against these games, of course. Popes declared them sinful, wasteful, dangerous to the soul. But really, do you think a knight was going to hang up his spurs because the Pope said no more fun? For them, ignoring papal decrees was almost as entertaining as jousting itself. Imagine asking a 20-year-old full of ale testosterone and brand new armor to stay home and read psalms instead. You'd have better luck convincing today's teenagers to delete TikTok. Still, the chaos began to acquire rules at least on parchment. Lances blunted boundaries, drawn heralds appointed. Yet rules are only words and adrenaline is louder. You see one rider thrown heavily, his leg pierced through by a splintered lance. Blood pours down his armor in a glistening ribbon, and attendants drag him away like a sack of grain. The crowd shifts murmurs, but then cheers again when another knight unseats his opponent with a dramatic crash. Entertainment is merciless. By now you notice something deeper stirring beneath the pageantry. This isn't just sport. It is a marketplace of ambition. Every noble who rides here is gambling reputation, fortune, even survival for a chance at glory. It is also a rehearsal for war, a place to test courage before the real killing fields. You realize the tournament is both stage and battlefield spectacle and slaughterhouse, and everyone, including you, can't quite look away. Your gaze drifts to the stands. There, peasants crane their necks, fists tight around hunks of black-bread throats, hoarse from cheering for men whose names they may never learn. For them, this is escape one day away from fields, famine, and rent collectors. For the nobles, it is something else entirely. Ladies lean forward from cushioned benches, jeweled veils, glinting silk scarves, fluttering like signals of desire. A knight rides with a ribbon tied to his arm, proof of a woman's favor. You think not without amusement that this was medieval Tinder swipe, right? With a piece of embroidered cloth swipe left by ignoring a man entirely. Vendors push through the throng. Honeyed almonds, roast pigeons, mugs of foamy ale. The smells mingle sweet, smoky sour with sweat. Children dart between legs chasing a scruffy dog that's stolen a bone. And somewhere a pickpocket's hand slips into a distracted farmer's purse. The field is not only an arena of knights, but of thieves, gamblers, and merchants, each chasing profit in the shadow of broken lances. As the sun dips lower, shadows stretch across the trampled ground. The last trumpet call shivers through the air, and the knights limp or are carried from the field. Some will drink and boast by the fire tonight, bruises worn like trophies. Others lie silent on stretchers, their armor dented their bodies, bloodied prayers murmured over them in hope of survival. You drift with the crowd toward the village road. A man balances a battered shield on his shoulder. Children chatter about their favorite champions, and old woman insists tomorrow's matches will be even better. Dust rises in the evening light, and in it you feel the strange mix of awe and unease. You have witnessed something dazzling and dreadful all at once, a theater of violence where glory and politics danced hand in hand. And as you leave the field, ears still ringing with hoofbeats and trumpets, you understand why these tournaments endured despite bans, despite deaths, despite everything. They gave a society starved of beauty and desperate for release the closest thing to magic they could muster, the chance to believe for one roaring afternoon that steel and courage could bend the world to human will. The heralds cry out once more, their voices cracking against the roar of the crowd, and another melee begins. But this time you watch with sharper eyes, noticing the strange blend of chaos and order. At first it looks like unbridled violence, knights crashing together, blades clanging, horses, rearing men dragged through the mud. Yet behind it all you begin to see the pattern. The tournament is not pure anarchy, it is violence written into a script, a play with rules. The lances are sometimes tipped with blunt heads meant to break on impact rather than pierce. The field is marked with barriers, boundaries to hold the fury in place. Heralds stand ready to announce victors and keep score. And yet you can see how thin the line is between safety and disaster. Rules are whispered in Latin, but blood is spilled in every language. A lance might be blunted, but a broken rib feels the same. A horse might be trained, but when panic hits its hooves, still crush skulls without hesitation. The church tried again and again to abolish these games. Sermons thundered, tournaments were sinful, a temptation to vanity, a waste of noble blood that should be preserved for holy wars. But the same bishops who preached abstinence often accepted bribes to look the other way, or even took seats in the stands to watch. You picture a robed cleric clapping politely as a knight is knocked cold, then sighing dramatically about the wickedness of the age. Hypocrisy is as eternal as stone. For the nobles, the tournament was more than a show. It was training for the battlefield. Every clash taught them how to control a destrier in chaos, how to strike with precision, how to breathe calmly even as death loomed close. Kings sponsored tournaments to test loyalty to see which knights showed bravery and which faltered. You realize it is rehearsal dressed as entertainment, war disguised as spectacle. And the audience, eager for a glimpse of glory, is complicit in the illusion. Your attention drifts back to the stands. What a world the crowd is. Peasants cluster together, some still in muddy work tunics, their faces glowing with a hunger for something bigger than their own fields. They clutch cups of ale, warm and sour, and shout themselves hoarse, cheering for champions they've never met. For them, the tournament is a doorway out of drudgery, a brief chance to pretend they belong in a story larger than their own. Meanwhile, nobles lounge under striped canopies, fanning themselves lazily. Ladies wear gowns embroidered with so much gold thread, you wonder how they manage to breathe. They lean forward, tossing down favors, silken scarves, or ribbons tied to lances, tokens of affection, or at least flirtation. To you, it looks suspiciously like medieval speed dating. Swipe right with a scarfs. Swipe left by pretending you didn't see a knight ride past. The stakes, of course, are far bloodier. Vendors shout above the din. Roasted chestnuts crack in their shells, spitting steam. Honey cakes crumble in sticky hands. Ale froths over the rims of wooden mugs. The smells of food blend with the acrid stench of sweat, dung, and metal until the whole fairground becomes a perfume of hunger and chaos. Children chase stray dogs through the crowd, shrieking with laughter, while pickpockets slip purses from belts with silent skill. One poor farmer realizes too late his wages are gone, his protest drowned in the trumpet's next blast. Gambling thrives here as much as jousting. Dice rattle in hidden corners, men wager on which knight will fall first. Which horse will bolt? Which banner will be carried from the field in triumph? Fortunes are lost in minutes, reputations ruined before the sun sets. You think of it as a casino without walls, except here, when you lose, you might also lose an arm. And yet, despite the carnage, the blood, the filth, the hypocrisy, the people love it. You look around and see faces alight, not with horror, but with exhilaration. The tournament is catharsis, a release valve for a society under constant pressure from plague, famine, and war. Here they can scream, laugh, and cry at the spectacle of violence made glorious. For a few hours, misery pauses, replaced by the pounding rhythm of hooves and the glitter of steel. As twilight falls, the final matches end. The field is littered with broken lances, dented shields, scraps of cloth, and dark patches where blood has seeped into the earth. Knights limp back to their tents, some proud, others humbled. Servants drag wagons of wounded men toward makeshift infirmaries, their groans fading into the night air. And the crowd disperses slowly, buzzing with stories to tell. Who triumphed, who disgraced themselves, who rode so valiantly that songs might be sung of them tomorrow. You follow the stream of people along the rutted road. A boy skips beside his father, imitating a joust with a stick and a laugh. A merchant counts coins in the fading light, his smile sharp as a blade. An old woman mutters predictions about which knight will fall next week, her voice half prophecy, half gossip. Behind you, the field darkens, torches burning low, and the last echoes of horns fade into silence. And in that silence, you realize what you've witnessed. Not just a game, not just entertainment, the tournament is a mirror of the age, brutal, glorious, contradictory. It is a place where men gamble with their lives, where crowds feed their hunger for spectacle, where politics masquerades as sport, and where violence polished with pageantry becomes almost holy. You exhale the night air cool against your skin, and you feel the strange weight of it settle into you. Tomorrow the knights will ride again, the trumpets will sound, the crowds will roar. But for now you drift away from the field, the rhythm of hooves still echoing in your ears and the scent of trampled grass and blood clinging to your cloak. The tournament has ended, but its shadow lingers, an intoxicating blend of courage and cruelty, laughter and pain. And as you walk toward the edge of the forest, you sense that this is only the beginning. For if tournaments were the theater of violence among men, then hunts were its twin, the theater of violence against nature. And tomorrow, as the horns of the chase sound in the mist, you will find yourself swept into that world as well. The first light of dawn creeps over the forest, spilling gold across a land heavy with dew. You wake to the sound of horns long and low, vibrating through the mist like the groan of some ancient creature. The air smells of wet earth, pine needles, and horses restless before the chase. Hounds bay in the distance, their cries echoing off the trees, sharp enough to pierce through the fog in your mind. It is not peaceful, not serene, but it is alive. You rise shivering slightly in the chill and realize you are about to witness another kind of spectacle. If tournaments were violence between men, the hunt is violence against nature, ritualized, elevated and reserved for the noble few. Around you, lords and ladies mount their horses, cloaks swirling falcons, perched on gloved wrists like jeweled sentinels. The peasants stand at the edges, eyes lowered, waiting to play their part as beaters, carriers, and butchers. This is not their game. The forest, like everything else, belongs to the Lord. The horns sound again, sharper this time. Dozens of hounds surge forward, muscles taut leashes snapping like bowstrings. Their breath puffs in pale clouds, their eyes burning with frenzy. The kennel masters curse and shout, trying to hold back the living tide until the signal comes. When it does, the dogs explode into the trees, their voices merging into a single scream that makes your bones vibrate. You follow the riders into the forest. Branches slap against your cloak mud, splashes your boots, and the smell of crushed ferns rises around you. Then suddenly a flash of movement. A stag, tall and proud, bursts from the underbrush. Its antlers catch the light like polished bronze, its eyes wide with panic. The chase is on. Horses pound the earth hooves, tearing at the soil, while the hounds stretch forward closer with every bound. The noise is deafening. Horns, shouts, dogs, the crash of bodies through undergrowth. The stag leaps, fallen logs bursts through thickets, but the circle tightens. A noble at the front lowers his spear, face rigid with concentration. One thrust, one cry, and the beast collapses. Trumpets blare in triumph. The hounds descend, teeth flashing, rewarded with entrails tossed from the carcass. Blood steams in the cold air. You shiver. This is not chaos. It is theater staged with deadly precision. You recall the story of Mary of Burgundy, the young duchess who loved hunting more than courtly dances. She rode astride scandalously like a man, her falcons hooded in gold thread embroidery, her arrows sharp and true. She defied expectations, living fast, living bold. And then in 1482, her horse stumbled, throwing her violently against a tree. 25 years old, spine-broken, life ended. A woman who chased freedom in the forest found only death beneath its branches. The nobles remember her with songs and statues, but you can't shake the bitter irony. The pastime she loved most was the one that killed her. Falconry is another stage in this play. You watch a falconer lift his arm, the leather glove glinting in morning light. A hood is pulled free, and the bird's eyes blaze with predatory fire. In a heartbeat, it launches skyward, wings slicing the air, rising higher and higher, until it stoops, folding itself into a missile. It plummets with terrifying speed, striking a hair below in an explosion of feathers and dirt. The kill is immediate, merciless. The crowd of nobles cheers softly, as if applauding fine music. To own such a bird is not simply to hunt. It is to flaunt wealth. A white gerfalcon from the icy north could cost as much as a castle. Imagine trading fortifications and land for a bird that might claw your face if it's in a bad mood. Falcons are medieval Ferraris, symbols of speed, power, and status. You chuckle at the thought of nobles competing over whose bird flies faster, like children bragging about whose horse is prettier. Except here the bragging comes with talons sharper than knives. Training them is agony. Days of patience, cuts and scratches, endless scraps of meat, dangled at just the right time. The falconer becomes part magician, part servant, part masochist. But when the bird returns, blood on its beak, feathers ruffled with victory, it is stroked tenderly, almost worshipped. The bond between man and predator feels eerie, like a pact made with something half divine, half dangerous. Yet hunting and falconry carry danger not just for the prey. Louis XII of France. So the tale goes, once nearly lost an eye to his own hawk. Others were thrown from their horses, gored by boars, trampled in the frenzy. For nobles, the risk was part of the thrill. To chase the beast was to court death, to prove courage, to taste, for one fleeting moment, a sense of control. But the peasants at the edge of the forest knew another truth. For them, hunting was never entertainment, it was survival. A rabbit snared, a pheasant stolen, could mean life for a family in winter. Yet the forest belonged to the crown, and poaching was punished brutally. A hand cut off, an ear sliced away, even execution for repeat offenders. Imagine losing your life because you dared to feed your starving children. Still, they risked it. Hunger does not wait for permission. The ritual of the curé completes the performance. The stag's carcass is laid out, entrails offered to the dog's horns, sounding solemn notes. The lord delivers the final strike, even if the beast is long dead to prove his dominance. Servants cut and clean bowing low, while nobles sip wine and laugh. Later in the castle hall, the meat will be roasted feathers and antlers reattached. The animal paraded in grotesque parody of life. It is theater again, propaganda carved in flesh, and you stand there watching, caught between awe and unease. The hunt, like the tournament, is not merely sport. It is a ritual of power, a declaration of hierarchy. It proclaims the Lord commands, nature obeys, peasants submit. And yet, as the falcons scream, as the hounds snarl over bloody scraps, you sense another truth whispering beneath it all. The forest is not tamed. Wolves still howl at night, boars still gore, hunters' falcons, still blind kings. The veneer of control is thin, and beneath it nature waits patient, unbroken. The day stretches onward, the sun lifting higher, the forest alive with echoes of horns and barking hounds. You feel the rhythm of it now, the strange choreography where nobles act like generals, dogs like soldiers, and the peasants like stagehands in a play written for someone else's glory. Every detail hums with ritual. You notice how carefully the dogs are fed from the stag's entrails, each bite tossed ceremoniously as trumpets moan overhead. To your eyes, it is grotesque, but to them it is sacred. The dogs must be rewarded, the beast must be honored, and the Lord must be seen to preside over it. All his authority shining brighter than the sun. You wonder if anyone actually enjoys the meat later. Venison roasted whole, sometimes refeathered, or even redressed in its antlers to look magnificent, served alongside pies so large that live birds are hidden inside. Guests clap when sparrows burst into the smoky great hall, though you imagine the kitchen staff silently cursing the chaos. It is medieval fine dining, more about shock and spectacle than flavor. Imagine going to a restaurant today, ordering chicken pie, and the waiter opens it only for a flock of pigeons to flap into your face. You'd leave a one-star review. They left poetry. The nobles sip their wine, gesture dramatically with their knives, laugh with mouths still full of greasy meat. To them, the hunt is not only about killing, it is about displaying mastery over nature and servants alike. The stag is dead, yes, but so too is the illusion of equality. At this table you know your place. Yet danger seeps in even to these banquets. You remember the falcon that blinded Louis XII, the countless nobles who were thrown, trampled, gored. Every hunt carries a whisper of death. Perhaps that's why they loved it. Perhaps the thrill of riding at breakneck speed, of pitting themselves against beasts with tusks and antlers, reminded them that life was fragile, that even privilege could not fully shield them. The chase was entertainment, but it was also an experiment amongst experiment and mortality. The clergy did little to disguise their fascination. Bishops kept hawks, cardinals posed with falcons, and some even brought them into church. The birds perched proudly as the mass droned on. You imagine the scene, a solemn hymn rising toward heaven, interrupted by a hawk screeching at an altar boy, feathers drifting over the pews. And no one dares complain. After all, who tells a bishop to put away his bird? It was as though even God himself was expected to respect the hierarchy of falcons. You notice the peasants at the edge of it, all their eyes hollow, their hands tight around nothing but hope. They are forbidden from hunting deer, boar, or any noble game. For them, the punishment for poaching is cruel and merciless hands, cut off ears, sliced away, even hanging for repeat offenders. All for daring to snare a rabbit. The irony is suffocating nobles chase animals for fun. Peasants for survival, and only the latter are punished. Still, hunger is louder than fear. Many creep into the woods at night, setting snares, risking everything. A rabbit on the spit could save a family. If caught, it could doom them all. You feel their desperation in your bones. And so the forest itself becomes divided. A kingdom inside a kingdom. For the nobles, it is a stage of leisure, a theater of blood performed for applause. For the peasants, it is a dangerous temptation, a reminder that even nature has been locked away behind invisible gates. You realize then that hunting is less about the animal and more about the hierarchy. The Lord rides with spear in hand because he can, because no one dares say he cannot. As the day fades, the rituals continue. The curé is finished. The dogs sated the horns, echo a last mournful call. The nobles return to their halls, cloaks spattered with mud. Voices raised in tales of near misses and glorious strikes. Servants trail behind with carcasses slung on poles, their backs bent. Beneath the weight, their faces unreadable. For them, there is no glory, only work. Tomorrow they will skin, butcher, clean, cook. Tomorrow they will serve the same people who laugh about today's chase over silver cups of wine. And you, walking at the edge of the forest, smell the iron tang of blood still hanging in the air. The trees seem to lean closer, as if whispering secrets the nobles ignore. Wolves prowl in the distance, their howls breaking through the dusk. The boars still root in the underbrush, tusks sharp as ever. The falcons rest hooded now, but in their dreams, months, they are still plummeting from the sky at impossible speed. Nature has not surrendered. It has only paused, waiting for another chance to remind humanity that control is an illusion. The hunting horns fade into silence. A thin mist drapes itself across the fields. Fires spark in the distance as castles prepare for feasting, the laughter of nobles soon to spill into the night. But here at the edge of the darkening wood, you feel the forest breathing untamed, eternal patient. And you realize the lesson hidden in the day's spectacle: the hunt is not about mastery. It is about pretending for a fleeting moment that mastery exists at all. Night passes, and with dawn comes, not the horns of the hunt, but the clamor of something far stranger. You wake to the sound of bells clanging wildly, drums beating in drunken rhythm, and voices raised in laughter and song. The air smells of smoke and roasting meat mingled with the sour tang of spilled ale. You are no longer in the hush of the forest. You are in the heart of a medieval carnival. If the hunt was about order and hierarchy, the carnival is about inversion and chaos. The lords no longer sit high in their saddles, the bishops no longer command with solemn gravity. Here, for a few days, the world flips upside down. A peasant might be crowned king for the day, a choir boy elected bishop, a fool dressed in rags might command respect. And everyone plays along, half in jest, half in desperate need of release. You weave through the crowd, dazzled and disoriented. Costumes blaze with color, reds, greens, blues that almost glow in the dim winter light. Masks hide faces, some grotesque, some comic, some unsettlingly lifelike. The air is thick with incense smoke, sweat, and the greasy perfume of fried dough. Minstrels strum lutes and bagpipes wail like dying geese, but no one minds. The point is not harmony. The point is noise. The Feast of Fools is underway. A donkey is led into the church, its braying echoing down the nave, while drunk priests sing hymns backward and dance in their vestments. You stare, unsure whether to laugh or recoil. The congregation claps, some jeer, some cheer, and in the middle of it all, the Lord of Misrule presides, an ordinary man chosen at random, now commanding nobles to fetch wine or dance like chickens. And they obey, giggling and swaying, pretending not to care about dignity for once in their rigid lives. You think of Mardi Gras centuries later, of Coachella today, and realize carnivals are not so different. They are pressure valves, brief sanctioned explosions of chaos to keep society from cracking under its own weight. Everyone knows the rules will return tomorrow. But tonight, the absurd is holy. The drunker the priest, the funnier the bishop boy, the better. And yet beneath the laughter lies something sharper. The Feast of the Pheasant held in Burgundy was more than revelry. It was theater with a political edge. Guests feasted not just on exotic dishes, but on promises of crusade oaths, sworn in between gulps of wine and bites of roasted swan. Entertainment, propaganda, politics, it all blurs together until you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. The carnival masks may be silly, but the power beneath them is deadly serious. You pause by a stall where sausages sizzle on skewers. The vendor presses one into your hand, greasy and hot, the meat spiced with pepper that traveled across half the world to reach this square. Around you, gamblers throw dice, jugglers toss knives dangerously close to drunk spectators, and fire eaters' buffs spew flames into the winter dusk. Children shriek with delight, clutching sweet pastries, while their parents shout themselves hoarse in laughter. A noble woman, her gown splattered with ale, twirls clumsily with a barefoot peasant, both roaring with mirth. The absurdity is intoxicating, but you also feel its edge. The carnival is not safe. Fires break out, drunken brawls turn bloody disease, spreads quickly in the crush of unwashed bodies. And when masks hide faces, crimes slip easily into shadows. You feel a hand brush your belt and realize someone has tried to cut your purse. You slap the hand away, but the thief is already gone, swallowed by the sea of revelers. The drums grow louder, the night more frenzied. A mock funeral procession winds through the square coffins carried aloft with skeleton masks grinning down. The crowd howls with laughter as if death itself has become a joke. Perhaps that is the point. In a world stalked daily by plague and famine, to laugh at death is the only way to keep living. Tomorrow the masks will come off. The priests will return to their pulpits, the lords to their halls, the peasants to their fields. But tonight you are swept into a dream of reversal and release, a delirious theater, where nothing is sacred, nothing is certain, and everything is allowed. The revelry grows stranger as the festival rolls on. Somewhere in the crowd, a small boy is lifted onto a throne, a crooked crown perched on his head. The people cheer wildly your first glimpse of the boy bishop. For one day, a child takes the seat of power robes too big for his thin shoulders rings slipping off his tiny fingers. He blesses the congregation in a squeaky voice while the real bishop sits beside him, smiling tightly as though trying not to look humiliated. Everyone laughs, yet everyone watches closely too. For this brief, absurd day, the lines of authority blur. You imagine what it must feel like for that boy. Yesterday, he was just a choir singer shivering in the cold with patched boots. Today, he waves to crowds, eats sweetmeats from silver trays, and commands priests twice his age to kneel. Tomorrow, he will be back to scrubbing floors. It is a glimpse of power fleeting, intoxicating, cruel in its brevity. Like being handed the keys to a Ferrari for a single afternoon, then return to your bicycle forever. Nearby, another parody unfolds the Ass Festival. A donkey bedecked with ribbons is led into the church. Its braying interrupts the chants, its hooves clattering against stone. At the end of each prayer, the congregation roars back, not amen, but hee-haw. You cover your mouth to stifle laughter, but the absurdity is infectious. Perhaps it is irreverent, perhaps even blasphemous, but in a world where death lurks in every cough and stomach cramp, mocking the sacred can feel like survival. The costumes grow more outrageous. Some revelers wear masks shaped like grotesque demons' horns, curling tongues, lolling eyes painted a shocking red. Others dress as animals, wolves, stags, even pigs, snorting and rooting in the dirt for laughs. Beneath the comedy, you feel a darker current. These masks are not just for fun. They are symbols of the thin line between humanity and beast order and chaos. For one day, that line is crossed and everyone howls in delight. As night falls, the carnival burns brighter. Torches line the square shadows, dancing wildly across walls. A procession carries a giant effigy of a man stuffed with straw. They parade him through the streets, jeering and singing before tossing him onto a bonfire. Sparks fly, flames roar, and the crowd cheers as though they are watching sin itself consumed. In truth, perhaps they are burning their frustrations, their fears, their grief. Or maybe they're just drunk and enjoy a good. You pause by a group of gamblers huddled near a tavern. Dice clatter, coins jingle, and accusations fly as loudly as laughter. Someone insists the dice are loaded. A fistfight breaks out, and within seconds, half the crowd is egging them on, cheering for blood. You shake your head. It seems no medieval entertainment is complete without at least one brawl. And yet, for all its chaos, you sense something strangely therapeutic in these festivals. The peasants dance until their legs ache, singing bawdy songs with verses too scandalous for the ears of saints. The nobles mingle with commoners' dignity, abandoned laughter, spilling as freely as ale. Even the clergy, for all their disapproval, cannot resist joining in quietly their own laughter, betraying them in the shadows. For one day, everyone is simply human, ridiculous, joyful, fragile, loud. You realize as the bonfire burns down to glowing embers that carnivals are more than release. They are rehearsal for endurance. Life in the Middle Ages is short, brutal, and uncertain. But if you can laugh at a donkey in church, if you can crown a boy as bishop, if you can dance with death itself wearing a painted mask, then perhaps you can survive another winter. The joke becomes a shield, the laughter a weapon. And the carnival with all its absurdity is nothing less than medicine for a wounded world. The crowd begins to thin, masks slipping off, songs fading to murmurs. Tomorrow fields must be plowed, taxes paid, prayers mumbled. Tomorrow order returns. But tonight you have danced with fools, eaten with bishops turned donkeys, sung with children dressed as kings. And you carry the echo of it inside you, the reminder that even in the darkest ages, people found ways to laugh, to mock, to resist despair, if only for one fleeting day. The festival stretches into its final hours, and though the fires burn lower, the energy remains wild. A troupe of actors takes the stage in the square performing a mystery play. Painted backdrops sway in the wind, the costumes are crude, and the script is half religious, half ridiculous. Devils leap from behind curtains to snatch at villagers. Angels with crooked wings stumble over their lines, and the audience roars with laughter. The story may be about salvation, but the performance is about community. Everyone sharing the same jokes, the same gasp, the same fleeting escape from daily misery. You notice how children sit rapt eyes wide, mouths open in wonder. They don't care if the acting is clumsy or the props are borrowed. They care that for once they are seeing stories come alive before them. For adults too, these plays offer something rare. When most people cannot read, when books are treasures locked away in monasteries, theater is education, entertainment, and escapism all in one. A puppet may stumble across the stage, but it teaches more about heaven and hell than any sermon delivered in Latin. Around you, food stalls do brisk trade, the scent of roasting meats mingling with fried dough and spiced wine. For many peasants, this is the only time of year they taste sugar or cinnamon spices carried by merchants. From lands so distant, they may as well be mythical. You bite into a pastry, its crust hot, its filling sticky sweet, and for a moment you understand why people save their coins all year for this indulgence. But indulgence can turn ugly. Too much wine, too much freedom, and suddenly the joy tips into violence. A fight breaks out near the edge of the square, two men grappling over a spilled cup. Others join in, punches flying until half the crowd is either cheering or dodging elbows. Someone is knocked into the fire, leaping back with a scorched cloak, cursing so loudly even the devil actors pause to laugh. You realize medieval festivals are tinderboxes, equal parts laughter and danger, beauty and brutality. And yet even as fists swing and masks crack, the deeper purpose shines through. The carnival is not simply chaos for its own sake. It is controlled chaos, licensed misrule. It lets the poor vent their frustrations, the rich taste humility, the clergy endure mockery. And once the steam is released, order returns. Society survives another year, not in spite of the madness, but because of it. You find yourself at the edge of the square as dawn approaches. The fires have burned to ash, the songs have dwindled to hoarse murmurs. A drunk noble slumps against a wall, his silken robe smeared with mud. A peasant woman snores in the grass, her child curled beside her like a cat. Masks lie scattered in the dirt, grinning demons painted. Saints, wide-eyed beasts, all discarded now, as if the night's illusions dissolved with the darkness. The priests will resume their sermons today, the lords their judgments, the peasants their endless toil. But you carry the carnival with you, the memory of laughter in the face of despair. It lingers like a candle flicker in the mind, fragile flickering but stubbornly alive. As you turn away, the square behind you, still reeking of smoke and spilled ale, you hear merchants setting up their stalls. The carnival may be over, but the fair is about to begin. Where the festival mocked the world, the market will sell it. Where the carnival offered escape through laughter, the fair will offer escape through trade song and stories for sale. You smile faintly, already catching the cries of hawkers drifting on the morning air, the smell of new bread, the clink of coins. The world of entertainment shifts again, flowing from chaos into commerce. And you, weary from dancing with fools and laughing at donkeys in church, step forward into the bustling world of the medieval fair. The morning mist lifts, and with it comes a new kind of noise. Not the horns of hunting, not the drunken chants of carnival, but the constant murmur of buying and selling. You follow the stream of people to a wide meadow beyond the town walls, and suddenly it opens before you, rows upon rows of tents and stalls, bright banners snapping in the breeze, the clatter of carts, the bray of donkeys, the endless hum of a marketplace alive. You have arrived at the medieval fair. The Stourbridge Fair, some say, was the largest in all of Europe, rivaling even the busiest ports. Imagine it: merchants from Flanders selling fine cloth, Italians hawking glassware, German traders offering metalwork, and somewhere at the edge, a local farmer pushing a wheelbarrow of cabbages that smell faintly like feet. It is the world in miniature, a collision of cultures, dialects, smells, and ambitions, all pressed into a few feverish weeks each year. The sounds are dizzying. A minstrel strums a lute, half in tune, half in wine. A juggler tosses knives dangerously close to your ear, grinning as though he would love to accidentally nick your hair. A hawker yells about miracle potions cures for gout, baldness, and heartbreak, while his neighbor sells roasted eels that glisten ominously in the sun. You hear the clink of coins, the rustle of cloth, the bleat of sheep dragged unwillingly to market. The air is thick with frying meat-spiced wine animal dung and the sour musk of too many people pressed too close. You wander deeper, overwhelmed by the sheer scale. Here spices more precious than gold sparkle in little pouches, saffron, cinnamon, pepper. There merchants display bolts of cloth dyed in colors so vivid they seem unreal scarlets, indigos, greens, brighter than any meadow. For most peasants, these are dreams they cannot afford, but they stare all the same as if just seeing them might lift their lives for a moment. The fair is not only commerce, it is theater. Mystery plays are performed on makeshift stages telling stories of saints and sinners in crude but captivating fashion. Puppeteers make children squeal with delight. Acrobats tumble through the dust. Fire eaters risk scorching their throats for a few coins, toss their way. Even the stalls themselves are performances. A butcher bellows about the tenderness of his beef, while swatting flies away with equal ferocity. A cloth merchant unfurls silk with a flourish, letting the sun catch its shimmer so that even the poorest bystander gasps. And as always, there is gambling. Dice roll in the mud, wagers fly over everything from horse races to rat fights. A man insists his trained goose can outrun a dog. You laugh until you realize people are actually betting on it. Coins exchange hands faster than you can follow, and fortunes vanish in minutes. The fair is a casino disguised as a festival, and the house always wins, except the house is the chaos itself. Of course, where there is money, there is theft. Pickpockets glide through the crowd like fish in water. You feel a tug at your belt spin and see only a flash of a boy's grin before he disappears. Even justice is swift and theatrical here. The court of pie powders, literally the court of dusty feet, sits in a tent at the edge of the fair, ready to judge disputes on the spot. A thief is tried, sentenced, and punished, all within an hour. You watch a man dragged forward, accused of selling false spices. The judge sniffs. The pouch sneezes violently and sentences the merchant to a whipping. The crowd cheers. Justice, medieval style, fast, public, and as much entertainment as deterrent. You notice too how the fair is a breeding ground for disease. Crowds pressed together, animals bleeding in the mud, food left out in the sun. It is a feast not only for buyers, but for bacteria. You think of the black death of fleas hiding in sacks of grain of sickness, spreading along the same roads that carry spices and cloth. The fair is a marketplace, yes, but also a perfect incubator for the next plague. You shudder and bite your pastry more cautiously. Still, there is no denying its magic. For the peasants, the fair is a glimpse of a wider world. Here they see colors they never imagined, foods they never tasted, languages they never heard. For a day or two they step out of their narrow villages and into something vast, something dizzying. And even if they leave with nothing more than sticky fingers from a honey cake, they carry home the memory of marvels. As the sun climbs higher, the fair roars louder, a living thing with 1,000 voices. And you realize if the tournament was the theater of violence, if the hunt was the theater of power, if the carnival was the theater of chaos, then the fair is the theater of the world itself, a place where everything is bought, sold, gambled, stolen, and performed. The deeper you wander into the fair, the more it feels like stepping into a fever dream stitched together with straw and silk. A troupe of actors has set up a stage on wagon wheels and the crowd swarms around them. The play is meant to be holy, a mystery of saints and miracles, but the performance wobbles between devotion and slapstick. Devils leap out wearing masks so crude they look more like potatoes with horns. Angels stumble across the boards with wings sagging like laundry left in the rain. The crowd howls in laughter, and you can't help but join them. Salvation has rarely looked so clumsy. For many in the crowd, this is the closest they will ever come to theater. Books are locked in monasteries. Literacy is rare, but here stories breathe in the dust and sweat. Children gape with mouths full of bread, their eyes wide as angels swat at devils with broomsticks. Old women nod knowingly, muttering that the devils look suspiciously like their husbands. You realize the play is less about heaven and hell and more about the collective relief of laughing together at anything that isn't winter or taxes. Just beyond a puppet show unfolds. Wooden figures clack against each other, squeaking out crude dialogue about drunken priests and cheating millers. The crowd roars again, some nudging their neighbors with a knowing wink. Puppet theater is safer than real mockery. A doll can say things a man would lose his tongue for. In that sense, puppets are the jesters of the fair mouths of cloth and wood, daring to say what everyone thinks. The air grows hotter as the day swells. The smell of frying fish battles with the sweet sting of candied almonds, while the stench of manure lurks underneath like an unwelcome bass note. You take a sip of spiced wine, sharp and burning, and immediately regret buying it from the shifty man with 3 teeth. It tastes like vinegar married to fire. Around you, people crunch apples, chew on sticky pies, and devour sausages that look suspiciously undercooked. You tell yourself food poisoning is just part of the entertainment. Music drifts across the square, bagpipes, bleeding drums, thumping voices shouting half songs, half arguments. A bear is led on a chain, made to dance clumsily, while children laugh and adults clap. The bear sways side to side, eyes dull ribs visible beneath its fur. You wince, but the crowd cheers louder. In the Middle Ages, cruelty isn't hidden in shadows, it's sold as family entertainment. Then there are the gamblers, ever present like flies on honey. Dice clatter in the mud, coins vanish into greedy hands. Accusations fly faster than the dice themselves. You watch one man swear the Virgin Mary blessed his roll, only to be punched in the face by his opponent. The crowd cheers not for justice, but for spectacle. Gambling is never really about winning, it's about the performance of losing loudly. Nearby, the court of pie powders convenes once more. You see a man accused of selling fake relics, a feather, supposedly from the angel Gabriel. The judge holds it up, squints, sneezes, and declares it chicken fluff. The merchant is flogged then and there, the crowd jeering gleefully as if this were just another sideshow. Medieval justice is fast, brutal, and above all, public. If you can't afford theater tickets, you watch a man whipped in the marketplace instead. And still disease waits patiently in the shadows of the fair. You notice pigs tied to posts, their snouts buried in filth. You see raw meat left on tables under the sun, flies thick enough to form a second skin. Children run barefoot, their laughter trailing behind them. But you wonder how many will cough blood in the weeks to come. The same roads that brought saffron and silk also carry plague. The fair is a marketplace for both wonder and death. Yet despite the filth and danger, you cannot deny the thrill. Where else can you see a goose race, a dog, a puppet, mock a bishop, a bear, stumble like a drunk uncle, and a merchant sell relics so fake they wouldn't fool a child? Where else can you taste spices from across the world, gamble away your wages, and watch justice handed out in the mud? The fair is the world condensed, a chaotic symphony of greed, laughter, cruelty, and awe. As the sun dips lower, torches begin to glow, and the fair shows no sign of slowing. Drummers beat faster. Jugglers throw higher, gamblers shout louder. Somewhere a fire eater inhales smoke and exhales a column of flame, the crowd gasping in unison. You realize you are no longer just watching a market, you are inside a living theater where every act is both survival and spectacle. As the evening deepens, the fair transforms once more. Lanterns swing above the stalls, their flickering light casting long shadows that dance across the muddy ground. The crowd thickens with drink, their voices rising in a ragged chorus of songs you half recognize, bawdy verses shouted with more gusto than tune. Somewhere a fiddler saws out a melody that fights bravely against the chaos drowned by laughter, the bark of vendors, the clink of mugs colliding. You wander past a tent where a storyteller holds an audience spellbound. His voice's low, deliberate words curling like smoke as he spins tales of knights who slay dragons and maidens who turn into saints. Children clutch their mothers' sleeves, eyes wide, while men nod sagely, as if they've just heard a truth deeper than the ale in their bellies. Yet you know tomorrow, these same men will stumble back into the fields, the dragons only weeds, the saints only taxes. For now, though, story is escape. At another corner, musicians strike up a wild dance. Feet stomp, hands clap, skirts whirl. A nobleman flushed with drink grabs the hand of a peasant girl, and for a brief moment the lines of class blur into rhythm. You smile at the absurdity, power forgotten, dignity abandoned, all replaced by spinning laughter in the dust. Of course, when dawn comes, he'll remember he owns her father's labor, but tonight she twirls like a queen. Not every moment is joyous. The shadows of the fair hold darker stories. A thief is caught dragged by his hair through the mud. The crowd gathers eagerly as the pie powder court delivers its verdict, lashes swift and merciless. Children cheer as the whip cracks as though cruelty itself is entertainment. You feel a chill run down your spine, not from pity, but from the realization that here, punishment is just another show. And then there is the silence after. The fair begins to thin. Merchants packing their wares, gamblers nursing losses, jugglers exhausted dogs tugging at scraps in the dirt. Smoke hangs in the air, thick and acrid, as if the day itself has been burned out. You breathe it in and realize you have just walked through a microcosm of the Middle Ages' wealth and poverty. Laughter and fear, devotion and fraud all packed into one sprawling theater of survival. Tomorrow, this meadow will be empty again. The stalls gone, the banners packed the mud, only scars of footprints fading into grass. But the memory will linger of devils leaping on stage of dice, clattering in shadows of spices gleaming like treasure of punishment delivered in the open air. The fair is both carnival and commerce, both wonder and warning. And as you step away from the glowing lanterns, you notice another light rising in the distance, the warm golden shimmer of a great hall's windows. The fair is for everyone, but the feast beyond those walls is not. Nobles gather at long tables, the air heavy with roasted meat, dripping fat and spiced wine poured endlessly into silver cups. If the fair is the theater of the world, then the banquet is its finale, lavish, excessive a performance, not of survival, but of indulgence. You leave behind the stalls and songs, following the scent of venison and honey wafting across the fields. Your stomach growls, though you already know this next stage of entertainment is not meant for you. It belongs to lords and ladies, to bishops and merchants, rich enough to buy a seat. And yet somehow you will slip inside to see the spectacle for yourself. The torches flare brighter as you approach the doors of the hall, yawning open like a beast hungry to swallow its guests. You step across the threshold, and suddenly the world of muddy fairs vanishes. Before you lies a table glittering with food you can barely name, peacocks redressed in their own feathers, pies stuffed with live birds, whole boars roasted with apples shoved in their mouths. Laughter echoes off the stone walls, and the smell of excess is overwhelming. The fair is behind you now, but the banquet has begun. The morning mist lifts, and with it comes a new kind of noise. Not the horns of hunting, not the drunken chants of carnival, but the constant murmur of buying and selling. You follow the stream of people to a wide meadow beyond the town walls, and suddenly it opens before you. Rows upon rows of tents and stalls, bright banners snapping in the breeze, the clatter of carts, the bray of donkeys, the endless hum of a marketplace alive. You have arrived at the medieval fair. The Stourbridge Fair, some say, was the largest in all of Europe, rivaling even the busiest ports. Imagine it merchants from Flanders selling fine cloth Italians, hawking glassware German traders offering metalwork, and somewhere at the edge a local farmer pushing a wheelbarrow of cabbages that smell faintly like feet. It is the world in miniature, a collision of cultures, dialects, smells, and ambitions, all pressed into a few feverish weeks each year. The sounds are dizzying. A minstrel strums a lute, half in tune, half in wine. A juggler tosses knives dangerously close to your ear, grinning as though he would love to accidentally nick your hair. A hawker yells about miracle potions, cures for gout, baldness, and heartbreak, while his neighbor sells roasted eels that glisten ominously in the sun. You hear the clink of coins, the rustle of cloth, the bleat of sheep dragged unwillingly to market. The air is thick with frying meat spice, wine, animal dung, and the sour musk of too many people pressed too close. You wander deeper, overwhelmed by the sheer scale. Here, spices more precious than gold sparkle in little pouches. Saffron, cinnamon, pepper. There, merchants display bolts of cloth dyed in colors so vivid they seem unreal scarlets, indigos, greens, brighter than any meadow. For most peasants, these are dreams they cannot afford, but they stare all the same, as if just seeing them might lift their lives for a moment. The fair is not only commerce, it is theater. Mystery plays are performed on makeshift stages telling stories of saints and sinners in crude but captivating fashion. Puppeteers make children squeal with delight, acrobats tumble through the dust. Fire eaters risk scorching their throats for a few coins tossed their way. Even the stalls themselves are performances. A butcher bellows about the tenderness of his beef, while swatting flies away with equal ferocity. A cloth merchant unfurls silk with a flourish, letting the sun catch its shimmer, so that even the poorest bystander gasps. And as always, there is gambling. Dice roll and the mud wagers fly over everything from horse races to rat fights. A man insists his trained goose can outrun a dog. You laugh until you realize people are actually betting on it. Coins exchange hands faster than you can follow, and fortunes vanish in minutes. The fair is a casino disguised as a festival, and the house always wins, except the house is the chaos itself. Of course, where there is money, there is theft. Pickpockets glide through the crowd like fish in water. You feel a tug at your belt spin and see only a flash of a boy's grin before he disappears. Even justice is swift and theatrical here. The court of pea powders, literally the court of dusty feet, sits in a tent at the edge of the fair, ready to judge disputes on the spot. A thief is tried, sentenced, and punished, all within an hour. You watch a man dragged forward, accused of selling false spices. The judge sniffs, the pouch sneezes violently, and sentences the merchant to a whipping. The crowd cheers. Justice, medieval style, fast, public, and as much entertainment as deterrent. You notice too how the fair is a breeding ground for disease. Crowds press together, animals bleeding in the mud, food left out in the sun. It is a feast not only for buyers but for bacteria. You think of the black death of fleas hiding in sacks of grain of sickness, spreading along the same roads that carry spices and cloth. The fair is a marketplace, yes, but also a perfect incubator for the next plague. You shudder and bite your pastry more cautiously. Still, there is no denying its magic. For the peasants, the fair is a glimpse of a wider world. Here they see colors they never imagined, foods they never tasted, languages they never heard. For a day or two, they step out of their narrow villages and into something vast, something dizzying. And even if they leave with nothing more than sticky fingers from a honey cake, they carry home the memory of marvels. As the sun climbs higher, the fair roars louder, a living thing with 1,000 voices. And you realize if the tournament was the theater of violence, if the hunt was the theater of power, if the carnival was the theater of chaos, then the fair is the theater of the world itself, a place where everything is bought, sold, gambled, stolen, and performed. The deeper you wander into the fair, the more it feels like stepping into a fever dream, stitched together with straw and silk. A troupe of actors has set up a stage on wagon wheels, and the crowd swarms around them. The play is meant to be holy, a mystery of saints and miracles, but the performance wobbles between devotion and slapstick. Devils leap out wearing masks so crude they look more like potatoes with horns. Angels stumble across the boards with wings sagging like laundry left in the rain. The crowd howls in laughter, and you can't help but join them. Salvation has rarely looked so clumsy. For many in the crowd, this is the closest they will ever come to theater. Books are locked in monasteries. Literacy is rare, but here stories breathe in the dust and sweat. Children gape with mouths full of bread, their eyes wide as angels swat at devils with broomsticks. Old women nod knowingly, muttering that the devils look suspiciously like their husbands. You realize the play is less about heaven and hell and more about the collective relief of laughing together at something. Anything that isn't winter or taxes. Just beyond, a puppet show unfolds. Wooden figures clack against each other, squeaking out crude dialogue about drunken priests and cheating millers. The crowd roars again, some nudging their neighbors with a knowing wink. Puppet theater is safer than real mockery. A doll can say things a man would lose his tongue for. In that sense, puppets are the jesters of the fair mouths of cloth and wood, daring to say what everyone thinks. The air grows hotter as the day swells. The smell of frying fish battles with the sweet sting of candied almonds, while the stench of manure lurks underneath like an unwelcome bass note. You take a sip of spiced wine, sharp and burning, and immediately regret buying it from the shifty man with 3 teeth. It tastes like vinegar married to fire. Around you, people crunch apples, chew on sticky pies, and devour sausages that look suspiciously undercooked. You tell yourself food poisoning is just part of the entertainment. Music drifts across the square, bagpipes, bleeding drums, thumping voices shouting half songs, half arguments. A bear is led on a chain made to dance clumsily while children laugh and adults clap. The bear sways side to side, eyes dull ribs visible beneath its fur. You wince, but the crowd cheers louder. In the Middle Ages, cruelty isn't hidden in shadows, it's sold as family entertainment. Then there are the gamblers ever present like flies on honey. Dice clatter in the mud. Coins vanish into greedy hands. Accusations fly faster than the dice themselves. You watch one man swear the Virgin Mary blessed his roll, only to be punched in the face by his opponent. The crowd cheers not for justice, but for spectacle. Gambling is never really about winning, it's about the performance of losing loudly. Nearby, the court of pie powders convenes once more. You see a man accused of selling fake relics of feather, supposedly from the angel Gabriel. The judge holds it up, squints, sneezes, and declares it chicken fluff. The merchant is flogged then and there, the crowd jeering gleefully as if this were just another sideshow. Medieval justice is fast, brutal, and above all, public. If you can't afford theater tickets, you watch a man whipped in the marketplace instead. And still, disease waits patiently in the shadows of the fair. You notice pigs tied to posts, their snouts buried in filth. You see raw meat left on tables under the sun, flies thick enough to form a second skin. Children run barefoot, their laughter trailing behind them, but you wonder how many will cough blood in the weeks to come. The same roads that brought saffron and silk also carry plague. The fair is a marketplace for both wonder and death. Yet despite the filth and danger, you cannot deny the thrill. Where else can you see a goose race a dog, a puppet mock a bishop, a bear stumble like a drunk uncle, and a merchant sell relics so fake they wouldn't fool a child? Where else can you taste spices from across the world, gamble away your wages, and watch justice handed out in the mud? The fair is the world condensed, a chaotic symphony of greed, laughter, cruelty, and awe. As the sun dips lower, torches begin to glow and the fair shows no sign of slowing. Drummers beat faster, jugglers throw higher, gamblers shout louder. Somewhere a fire eater inhales smoke and exhales a column of flame, the crowd gasping in unison. You realize you are no longer just watching a market, you are inside a living theater where every act is both survival and spectacle. As the evening deepens, the fair transforms once more. Lanterns swing above the stalls, their flickering light casting long shadows that dance across the muddy ground. The crowd thickens with drink, their voices rising in a ragged chorus of songs you half recognize, bawdy verses shouted with more gusto than tune. Somewhere a fiddler saws out a melody that fights bravely against the chaos, drowned by laughter, the bark of vendors, the clink of mugs colliding. You wander past a tent where a storyteller holds an audience spellbound. His voice's low, deliberate words curling like smoke as he spins tales of knights who slay dragons and maidens who turn into saints. Children clutch their mother's sleeves, eyes wide, while men nod sagely as if they've just heard a truth deeper than the ale in their bellies. Yet you know tomorrow, these same men will stumble back into the fields, the dragons only weeds, the saints only taxes. For now, though, story is escape. At another corner, musicians strike up a wild dance. Feet stomp, hands clap, skirts whirl. A nobleman flushed with drink grabs the hand of a peasant girl, and for a brief moment, the lines of class blur into rhythm. You smile at the absurdity, power forgotten, dignity abandoned, all replaced by spinning laughter in the dust. Of course, when dawn comes, he'll remember he owns her father's labor, but tonight she twirls like a queen. Not every moment is joyous. The shadows of the fair hold darker stories. A thief is caught dragged by his hair through the mud. The crowd gathers eagerly as the pie powder court delivers its verdict, lashes swift and merciless. Children cheer as the whip cracks as though cruelty itself is entertainment. You feel a chill run down your spine, not from pity, but from the realization that here punishment is just another show. And then there is the silence after. The fair begins to thin, merchants packing their wares, gamblers, nursing losses, jugglers, exhausted dogs tugging at scraps in the dirt. Smoke hangs in the air thick and acrid as if the day itself has been burned out. You breathe it in and realize you have just walked through a microcosm of the Middle Ages' wealth and poverty, laughter and fear, devotion and fraud, all packed into one sprawling theater of survival. Tomorrow, this meadow will be empty again. The stalls gone, the banners packed the mud, only scars of footprints fading into grass. But the memory will linger of devils leaping on stage, of dice clattering in shadows, of spices gleaming like treasure of punishment delivered in the open air. The fair is both carnival and commerce, both wonder and warning. And as you step away from the glowing lanterns, you notice another light rising in the distance, the warm, golden shimmer of a great hall's windows. The fair is for everyone, but the feast beyond those walls is not. Nobles gather at long tables, the air heavy with roasted meat, dripping fat and spiced wine poured endlessly into silver cups. If the fair is the theater of the world, then the banquet is its finale. Lavish, excessive a performance not of survival, but of indulgence. You leave behind the stalls and songs following the scent of venison and honey wafting across the fields. Your stomach growls, though you already know this next stage of entertainment is not meant for you. It belongs to lords and ladies, to bishops and merchants rich enough to buy a seat. And yet somehow you will slip inside to see the spectacle for yourself. The torches flare brighter as you approach the doors of the hall, yawning open like a beast hungry to swallow its guests. You step across the threshold and suddenly the world of muddy fairs vanishes. Before you lies a table glittering with food you can barely name, peacocks redressed in their own feathers, pies stuffed with live birds, whole boars roasted with apples shoved in their mouths. Laughter echoes off the stone walls and the smell of excess is overwhelming. The fair is behind you now, but the banquet has begun. The feast stretches on, and with it comes not only endless food but the parade of reputation. You hear the name whispered among the servants, Taillavent, the great chef of France, the man who wrote Le Viandier, one of the first cookbooks of Europe. You picture him in the smoky kitchens below, shouting at his underlings as cauldrons boil and knives flash. His recipes are more than instructions, they are performances. How to serve a fish so it looks as though it still swims. How to roast a bird so it appears to breathe fire, how to drown meat in spices until the taste of rot is politely hidden beneath saffron and pepper. Taillavent was less a cook and more a magician, turning decay into spectacle. And spectacle is the word. Platters arrive borne by sweating servants, each dish designed to make jaws drop before mouths chew. Swans with gilded beaks, boars' heads stuffed with smaller birds' jellies, molded into castles. Porridge dyed bright green for no reason at all except to prove the cook had access to expensive pigments. You realize that flavor is secondary. What matters is the gasp, the display, the proof that the host has wealth enough to waste. But beneath the glittering surface lies something foul. The rushes spread across the floor, meant to soak up spills, are black with grease and littered with bone scraps and the occasional rat darting through the shadows. Dogs fight under the tables for fallen meat, their growls mixing with the roar of human laughter. A servant drops a trencher, scoops it back up, and places it before a guest without hesitation. Hygiene is a modern luxury. Here, excess covers the stench. You wrinkle your nose, the air so thick with smoke and sweat that it clings to your lungs. The nobles don't notice or don't care. They laugh with mouths slick with fat, their hands wiping grease onto their silken sleeves. They toast each other, loudly spilling wine across the table, the crimson liquid dripping like blood. Each toast grows more outrageous, to kings, to saints, to pigs, roasted so well even angels would eat them. And with each gulp, voices grow louder, movements less controlled, laughter more dangerous. You watch as a minstrel strikes up a bawdy tune, his lute jangling his lyrics, skating just this side of blasphemy. The crowd claps along, shouting the verses with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Then comes the fool bells, jingling, face-painted, cap twisted. He capers, mocks, tells truths no one else dares. He jokes that the Lord's new tapestry looks suspiciously like his wife's bedsheet, and the hall explodes in laughter. But beneath the noise, you notice the Lord's smile stiffen. You realize a jester's life is balanced on a knife's edge. One clever barb earns gold. One step too far earns exile or worse. As the night deepens, the feast grows less like a celebration and more like a battlefield of endurance. Some nobles slouch red-faced, muttering incoherently. Others sing at the top of their lungs, pounding the table until goblets jump. A merchant vomits into his cup, wipes his mouth, and drinks again to prove his fortitude. You shudder. Excess has no bottom here. Servants move quickly, clearing plates, replacing trenchers, fetching more wine from barrels that seem bottomless. They work silently and visibly like shadows, though you catch the exhaustion in their eyes. For them, the feast is not entertainment but torment, a reminder that they will taste nothing but scraps while carrying endless platters of plenty. Then comes the final course subtleties, they call them. Sugar sculptures molded into ships, into saints, into beasts with gaping mouths. Marzipan twisted into flowers, golden orbs of candied fruit. They glisten under the torchlight, fragile and beautiful. Guests gasp, some laugh, some poke them with greedy fingers before the servants can even set them down. Sugar is more precious than gold, and here it is devoured with abandon. You bite into one, its sweetness cloying, its texture grainy, and realize your teeth may never forgive you. Medieval dentistry was not kind. And as you sit back full to bursting, choking on smoke and spice, you understand the feast's true purpose. It is not to feed, not even to impress. It is to overwhelm, to drown the senses in a tidal wave of abundance until no one dares question the power that provides it. Hunger is silenced by spectacle. Envy is soothed by the promise of leftovers. Authority is baked into every pie, roasted into every swan, sugared into every sculpture. You glance down at the rushes beneath the table where rats scurry among scraps and dogs lick at bones. You think of the peasants outside waiting for tossed trenchers, hoping for a crust still soft enough to chew. And you see it clearly, the feast is theater, but it is also propaganda, written not in parchment, but in grease and smoke. The feast shows no sign of ending, though the hour grows late. The torches sputter, the air thickens with smoke, and the heat from the fires turns the hall into a furnace. Nobles lean back in their chairs, bellies swollen, eyes glazed. Some continue to shovel food in, out of sheer habit, chewing mechanically as if their jaws have forgotten how to stop. Others slump forward, snoring into trenchers soaked with grease and wine. The great banquet, once dazzling, has become a parody of itself, glory sagging into gluttony. A priest rises to bless the gathering, but his voice slurs, and he forgets the words halfway through. Laughter erupts, some banging goblets against the table in mocking applause. The host beams, pretending this is all part of the plan. For him, success is measured not in piety, but in noise. If the hall is loud enough, if bellies are round enough, if wine spills freely enough, then power has been proven. You look around and notice the other side of the feast, the floor. Dogs lick at scraps, their fur matted with grease. Rats dart boldly between rushes, feasting as happily as any lord. A servant slips on the filth, tumbles, and is slapped back to his feet before he can even protest. This is the truth beneath the spectacle waste chaos. Exhaustion hidden under velvet and gold. You realize the feast is both miracle and madness. A machine that devours everything, food, money, dignity, even the health of those who sit too long at the table. And still the entertainers perform. Jugglers toss knives dangerously close to heads, nodding in drunken stupor. Minstrels sing, their voices cracking against the rising din. The fool leaps onto the table, scattering goblets, shouting a rhyme about how even kings must fart, and the hall explodes in laughter that feels less like joy and more like release. For a moment you think he may be killed for the insult. Instead, the host tosses him a coin, and the fool bows deeply, his bells jingling. In a hall so bloated with indulgence, even truth dressed in rags becomes a delicacy. The final goblet is raised, the last toast made, and slowly the feast dissolves into fragments. Some nobles stagger away on unsteady legs, others collapse onto benches too drunk to move. Servants swarm like ants, clearing carcasses, scooping bones, scraping grease. The hall empties, but the smell lingers, smoke meets sweat, and wine fused into a perfume that clings to your skin. You step outside into the cool night air, gasping as though you have escaped drowning. And as you walk away, you think of what the feast truly is, a theater of excess, where wealth masquerades as generosity, where gluttony pretends to be glory. You see it clearly now. The tournament showed violence as spectacle, the hunt showed dominance as ritual, the carnival showed chaos as relief, and the banquet shows indulgence as power. Each form of entertainment is a mask, and each mask hides a truth that no one dares speak aloud. Yet not all feasting happens in glittering halls. As you wander into the town, you hear another kind of noise, rougher roar, more human. Laughter spills from a low doorway, mingled with the thump of mugs against wooden tables and the shuffle of boots on straw. The smell is unmistakable, ale sweat and smoke. You have found the tavern. Here the walls are low, the benches uneven, the light dim and flickering. No swans gilded with gold, no pies bursting with birds. Instead, there is bread hard enough to crack a tooth stew, thick with mystery meat and ale sour, but strong. Men crowd shoulder to shoulder, their laughter loud, their curses louder. Dice rattle in the corners, coins clink, arguments flare. And you realize if the banquet was theater for the nobles, then the tavern is theater for everyone else. Cruder, dirtier, but no less alive. The feast has ended, but the game is just beginning. The tavern swallows you whole the moment you step inside. The door creaks shut behind you, and the noise hits like a wave. Laughter rough as gravel mugs slammed onto scarred tables, the low thrum of dice tumbling across wood. The air is thick sour with ale and sweat smoke curling in lazy ribbons from a fire that does more to choke than to warm. Compared to the glittering hall of the banquet, this place feels cramped, chaotic, but also strangely comforting. Here the food may be stale, the ale may taste like vinegar, but the joy is louder, rawer, less rehearsed. You squeeze onto a bench beside men, already half drunk, their faces red, their breath hot with barley and garlic. A serving girl slams down a mug before you foam, spilling over the edge. You drink wincing at the sharpness, but it does its job, warming your chest, loosening your tongue, blurring the edges of the world. Around you, voices rise and fall like waves. Stories are told, jokes shouted, arguments sparked and forgotten in the space of a heartbeat. The tavern is less a building and more a storm contained by four wooden walls. In one corner, dice rattle across the table. Men lean close, eyes-hungry coins clutched tight in calloused hands. The game is hazard, the medieval ancestor of craps and fortunes, can vanish faster than the ale is poured. You watch a farmer roll curse and slam his fist down as his last coin disappears into the hands of a grinning merchant. The crowd roars, half in sympathy, half in delight at his ruin. Here, gambling is not about winning, it's about watching someone else lose and lose loudly. Chess sits in another corner, quieter but no less dangerous. Two men hover over a carved set of pieces, each shaped with uncanny precision. They move pawns and bishops with the solemnity of priests, muttering under their breath as if the board itself carries divine weight. One set, you're told, comes from the far north, pieces like those found on the Isle of Lewis, with bulging eyes and grim faces carved from walrus ivory. The game seems serene, intellectual, until you realize the wager placed on it could buy a year's worth of bread. The loser does not simply lose dignity, he loses survival. The tavern swells with more people as night deepens. Merchants rub elbows with soldiers, peasants with traveling minstrels. A juggler tosses knives dangerously close to a drunk who barely notices, too busy shouting a love song badly out of tune. A man leads a bear cub on a chain demanding coins for a dance, while children giggle and adults clap in rhythm. The bear sways clumsily, eyes, dull ribs visible. You shake your head, wondering how entertainment so often stumbles into cruelty, yet the crowd cheers louder, as though laughter can drown out pity. And then the fight begins. It always does. Two men accuse each other of cheating at dice, voices rising, fists swinging. Tables topple, ale spills, and suddenly the tavern is a brawl. Chairs used as weapons mugs shattered into jagged edges. You press against the wall, heart racing, watching chaos erupt like fire. Yet no one flees. They laugh, they shout, they cheer. Violence here is not feared, but expected, woven into the night like another song. When the brawl ebbs, men stagger back to their seats, bloodied but grinning as though nothing happened. A tooth lies on the floor, a trophy of the evening. The serving girl sweeps it aside with her apron and pours another round. Life in the tavern is resilient that way. Fights end, all flows, dice roll again. The performance never truly stops. You realize that the tavern is a mirror of the banquet, but inverted. Where nobles flaunt wealth and roasted swans, peasants gamble away turnips' worth of wages on dice. Where the feast overwhelms with excess, the tavern overwhelms with noise. Where the banquet hides its filth under silks, the tavern flaunts it proudly, mud on the floor. Dogs at your feet, lice in your neighbor's hair. And somehow it feels more honest. As you sip the last of your ale, sour and warm, you feel a strange comfort settle over you. The tavern is not glorious, not beautiful, not even particularly safe, but it is alive. It is laughter loud enough to silence Hunger Games, reckless enough to quiet despair, companionship strong enough to make the night shorter. If the Great Hall was theater, the tavern is improvisation, messy and chaotic but real. The night grows thicker, and with it the tavern's pulse quickens. The dice rattle louder, the songs slur further, and the line between fortune and ruin narrows to the width of a coin's edge. You drift toward a table where men huddle close, the stakes rising with every throw. Copper turns to silver, silver to gold. One man swears his luck is divine that St. George himself guides his dice. Another calls him a liar and spits on the floor. You can't help but notice that the saints must have very peculiar hobbies if they spend their evenings deciding dice rolls. Gambling spreads like wildfire here. A man bets on whether the next jug of ale will arrive frothing or flat. Another wagers his boots on the outcome of a knife toss. A third, already barefoot, offers his belt, his cloak, and finally his dignity, stripping down to his shirt in the desperate hope of one lucky roll. You shake your head. The tavern is no casino, it's rougher, dirtier, but the thrill is the same. And unlike the banquet where nobles boast with food here, men boast with risk. Your ears catch whispers of more exotic games in far-off lands. In Venice, they say there is a place called the Ridotto, a house dedicated solely to gambling dice cards fortunes won and lost under painted ceilings. The first casino. You imagine these tavern players in such a place and you laugh? They'd probably still fight over a loaded die, shattering chandeliers with their fists. Civilization may polish the floor, but it doesn't polish the urge. A hush falls over one corner of the room. A game of chess again, but this time the wagers are staggering. Horses land promises of service. The players lean forward like generals over a battlefield, their ivory pieces gleaming in the dim light. The crowd gathers silent, but tense. You realize that here, even the noble game of kings becomes another excuse to gamble away everything. The thought occurs to you in the Middle Ages, men gambled not because they could afford to, but because they couldn't afford not to. Not every game is fair. You see a man palm his dice, slipping in ones carved with loaded weight. Another shuffles coins beneath his cloak, swapping real silver for lead. Cheating is expected, almost respected. If you get caught, you're a fool. If you succeed, you're clever. The line between gambler and thief is thinner than the foam on your ale, and the punishment usually just another fight, which by now feels less like justice and more like a scheduled performance. The tavern hums with danger, but also with strange intimacy. Strangers become comrades, over dice rivals become brothers, after a shared brawl songs erupt that bind voices into one drunken chorus. You sip your ale, letting the sound wrap around you, half lullaby, half thunder. You realize that here, entertainment is survival. In a world of hunger, plague, and toil, the tavern is where despair is drowned, if only for a night. A serving girl squeezes past her tray loaded with mugs. Men grope, laugh, shout, but she moves with practiced indifference, her eyes fixed ahead. She knows this dance too well, balancing between laughter and danger, her smile a mask that hides exhaustion. You sense her story in her silence. In taverns, not all games are played with dice. The fire crackles low, and you feel the weight of the night pressing down. Somewhere in the rafters, a pigeon freed from a banquet pie flaps restlessly as if mocking the noble's world of excess and this tavern's world of want. Two men resume their dice, one clutching a rosary, muttering prayers with every throw. You wonder if God is listening, or if he too has placed a bet. The tavern is alive, chaotic, brutal, but it is honest. Here, wealth and poverty sit side by side, dice decide destinies, and laughter roars louder than hunger. You lean back against the wall, the wood rough beneath your shoulders, your mug nearly empty. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you think if the feast was theater for the powerful, then the tavern is theater for the people. Both are messy, both dangerous, both absurd. One, gilded, one filthy, but both human. The tavern grows heavier as the night deepens, the air thick with smoke, spilled ale, and the musk of too many bodies packed together. The songs, slow voices, cracking men leaning on each other, not from camaraderie, but from exhaustion. The dice still rattle faintly in corners, desperate players clinging to hope that their luck will change, though most know it won't. You can feel the desperation in their eyes. The gamble is not for glory, but for bread, for a chance to keep tomorrow's hunger at bay. A man collapses face first onto the table, snoring into a puddle of wine. Another stumbles out into the street, his boots gone lost in a wager, his laughter echoing as though he has gained the world. You realize that here, losing everything can feel liberating because if you have nothing left to bet, at least the torment of hope is gone. The tavern is not just about drink or dice. It is about escape. Each mug, each roll of bones, each bawdy song is a door cracked open against the grind of medieval life. For peasants, it is the only luxury. For merchants, it is proof they still belong among men. For soldiers, it is the rehearsal of chaos they know too well. And for you, it is a window into the soul of the age, brutal, reckless, fleeting, but alive. You glance at the serving girl again. Her shift is ending, yet she still balances mugs with a weary grace. She slips a crust of bread into her apron, perhaps to feed a child waiting at home. No one notices. The men bellow, the dice tumble, the laughter rises. But her quiet act of survival feels more honest than any toast shouted tonight. The fire burns low embers glowing red. Shadows stretch across the walls, faces blur, voices fade. Slowly the tavern exhales like a beast settling into uneasy sleep. Dogs curl on the rushes, men slump in corners, a fool in motley snores, with his cap still jingling faintly as his head bobs against the table. And you realize that even here, among filth and fights, entertainment has done its job. It has dulled the edge of despair for one more night. You step outside into the cool night air. The tavern's roar muffles behind you, replaced by the distant hush of the town at rest. The streets are empty, save for the echoes of laughter and the faint clatter of a lute string carried on the wind. Somewhere in another hall or marketplace, entertainers still perform. Jugglers tossing knives, minstrels plucking melodies, jesters whispering truths in the guise of jokes. And you know where you must go next. For if the tavern is where men gamble their wages and their tempers, the stage is where they gamble their pride and their secrets. The road leads you forward away from dice and ale toward the flicker of torchlight where jesters caper, minstrels sing, and truth itself hides behind a painted smile. The tavern fades behind you. Ahead, the laughter of entertainers calls. You follow the faint sound of music drifting through the cool night air, your feet carrying you toward the glow of torches where a small crowd is gathered. The tavern's chaos fades behind you, replaced by a different kind of noise-laughter song. The rhythmic clap of hands. Here the stage is not a carved table in a smoky room, but an open square, a patch of ground claimed for the evening by traveling entertainers. A minstrel strums his lute, his voice cracked but steady, singing a ballad of a knight and his lady. The rhyme is clumsy, the tune familiar, but the crowd leans in anyway. For most of them, this is the closest they will ever come to poetry. The minstrel's fingers fumble on the strings, yet every mistake is met with cheers. You realize it isn't the song they love, it's the chance to forget their hunger for the length of a verse. A lute string, a cracked voice, and suddenly the world feels a little less cruel. Next to him, a juggler tosses knives high into the torchlight, the blades flashing dangerously before clattering back into his hands. He grins, bows, and sends them up again higher this time. The crowd gasps as one nearly slips. You wonder if they're cheering his skill or secretly hoping for blood. In the Middle Ages, entertainment often worked best when it balanced on the edge of disaster. Children squeal at a tumbler flipping through the dirt, his body bending in ways that look more painful than graceful. A fire-eater inhales smoke and spits flames into the night, his eyebrows singe the crowd roaring with glee. You can't help but think this isn't so much art as survival with applause. Each coin tossed is a meal, each cheer another day lived. And then the fool arrives. His cap jingles with bells, his face painted with crude smudges, his clothes a riot of colors so mismatched they could blind you in daylight. He stumbles into the circle, trips over his own feet, and lands flat on his back. The crowd erupts in laughter. He scrambles up bows dramatically and begins his act not of tricks but of words. He mocks the lord who taxed them, the priest, who drank too much wine, the merchant who cheats at weights. Everyone laughs, some nervously, some with genuine relief. The fool says what no one else can. His jokes are daggers wrapped in ribbons, truth hidden inside absurdity. You watch the crowd lean closer, their laughter covering the fact that they are listening too carefully. And you realize jesters are the medieval stand-up comedians. Except when their punchlines fail, the audience isn't bored, they're armed. The danger is part of the performance. A jester might win favor, gold, even a place at court. Or he might say one word too many and find himself whipped, exiled, or silenced forever. You see it in his eyes, behind the grin, behind the painted mask, there is sharpness, calculation. Every joke is a gamble. Every laugh is survival. Some entertainers rise higher than laughter in the street. You hear whispers of Thomas Becket, who began as a young clerk, lively and quick-witted, a man who could amuse kings. He rose step by step until he stood as Archbishop of Canterbury. Yet even he who once entertained royalty was struck down, murdered in his own cathedral. You think of the irony, whether in motley or in robes, an entertainer's tongue can be his salvation or his doom. The show continues. A dancing bear shuffles on its hind legs prodded by a handler's stick, its movements clumsy and heartbreaking. The crowd cheers, coins fall. The bear bows, or perhaps it just collapses. Cruelty once again hidden in the costume of entertainment. You shift uncomfortably, wondering how many smiles are built on someone else's suffering. But the night presses on, the crowd louder, the coins rattling into bowls, and you understand why these performers endure the risks. They hold the power to make peasants forget. Hunger to make nobles blush at truths too sharp to ignore, to make the world feel lighter, even if only for the space of a song. It is a fragile power, but real. And as the fool bows low, bells jingling his grin wide enough to hide both pride and fear, you clap too swept into the strange magic of it all. The tavern dulled despair with ale, but here words, tricks and fire chase it away. Entertainment in every form is a kind of defiance. The crowd shifts as a new performer steps forward. A troubadour, his cloak patched, but his voice rich. He sings of fin amours, courtly love, the kind of romance where knights pine endlessly for ladies far above their station. The melody rises and falls slow and sweet, and for a moment the rowdy crowd quiets. You close your eyes and hear the yearning in his voice, as if love itself could be sung into existence. Yet you know behind the poetry the reality is less noble. Half these courtly loves end in gossip scandal, or a hurried marriage arranged to cover mistakes. But tonight no one cares. Tonight love sounds beautiful even if it smells faintly of garlic and beer. The troubadour bows low, his hat filling with coins, and slips away, as another entertainer tumbles into the circle. This one juggles flaming torches, spinning them so close that his hair singes at the edges. The crowd gasps, half hoping to see him succeed, half hoping to see him fail spectacularly. You realize this is the secret of medieval entertainment: danger is the punchline. If someone bleeds, it's even funnier. But it is the jester who draws the longest stares. Dressed in motley bells, chiming with every move, he wanders among the people, whispering jokes, planting laughter like seeds. When he steps onto the small stage, the air tightens. He bows, grins, and begins. His voice rises clear, mocking lords, priests, even the king himself. You feel the tension in the laughter, half joy, half fear. Everyone knows a joke can topple walls faster than a siege if it cuts deep enough. You imagine him in a noble's court, standing in the shadow of banners, his painted grin, daring to say what knights and courtiers cannot. He calls the tax collector greedier than a pig, the bishop drunker than a monk at Easter, the queen's dog better dressed than half the guests. The courtiers laugh because to stay silent would be dangerous. The lord laughs, though his eyes narrow, weighing whether the truth beneath the jest is tolerable or intolerable. One wrong punchline and the fool's bells may toll his last. The power of jesters lies in this strange bargain. They are permitted to speak the unspeakable, to expose hypocrisy under the cloak of comedy, but their survival depends on the mood of their masters. It is freedom balanced on a razor's edge, liberty leased by laughter. You feel the danger in it, the brilliance and the madness. And yet jesters could wield real influence. A clever quip whispered at the right moment might sway a decision, soften a ruler's anger, or plant doubt in a noble's pride. Kings trusted them in ways they never trusted their counselors, because truth disguised as a joke is easier to swallow. Imagine ruling a kingdom and needing to hear honesty from the man paid to wear donkey ears. Strange, yes, but perhaps the most human thing of all. Nearby, a pair of minstrels strike up a lighter tune, their fiddles scraping joy back into the air. Children clap, couples twirl clumsily in the dirt, and the fool leaps into their dance, tripping deliberately, sending himself sprawling into the dust to raucous cheers. You laugh too, though a part of you wonders if he falls that way every night or if one day he simply won't get up. As the show winds on, coins clatter into bowls, applause rises and falls, and the performers bow low. They will pack their lutes, their juggling knives, their painted masks, and move on to the next town. The next square, the next crowd desperate for distraction. Their lives are as precarious as their acts, never guaranteed, always one mistake from ruin. But in their laughter, in their songs, in their fire and folly, they hold a kind of power even kings cannot claim. You step back into the night, the echoes of bells and lute strings fading behind you. The jesters and minstrels vanish into darkness. but their truths remain whispering in your mind. Entertainment here is more than escape, it is survival, resistance, defiance, all hidden in laughter. The road stretches ahead once more. You have seen violence in tournaments, domination in hunts, release in carnivals, commerce in fairs, and excess in banquets. You have drunk and gambled in taverns, laughed with fools and minstrels. And now as dawn stirs on the horizon, you wonder what of those who had none of these luxuries. What did the peasants do in the cracks of their endless toil to carve out joy of their own? The answer waits in the fields, in the cottages, in the humble songs sung under thatched roofs. You follow the faint sound of laughter carried on the morning wind, leading you toward the last stage of medieval entertainment, the pastimes of everyday peasants. The laughter of the fool still lingers in your ears as you leave the square bells, jingling faintly behind you. The entertainers vanish into the night, their songs and tricks fading like sparks in the dark. And as you walk away, the road grows quieter, the crowds thinner, until you find yourself back among the cottages and fields where most people live their lives. Here, there are no gilded halls, no banquets drowning in spice, no jesters daring to mock their masters. Here, the entertainment is simpler, humbler, but no less necessary. You pause by a small clearing where peasants gather at the end of the day. The air smells of wood smoke and damp earth bread baking in clay ovens, and the faint tang of manure that never truly leaves their clothes. Yet their faces are lit by laughter, their shoulders unburdened for a moment. A fiddler scrapes out a tune, crude but steady, and men and women join hands, stomping their feet in rhythm skirts, swishing in the dirt. The dance is messy, uneven, but it binds them together. For one night, they are not serfs or tenants, they are simply people stomping joy into the mud. Children play at the edges, carving shapes into the earth for nine men's. Morris tossing knucklebones, inventing rules as they go. Their laughter rises shrill and bright, the kind of sound that ignores hunger for a little while. Old men tell stories by the fire, their voices rough the tales recycled 100 times, but no one minds. Each story is a rope that ties the past to the present, keeping despair at bay. Inside the alehouse, smaller and rougher than the tavern mugs, clink softly. The ale is thin, little more than flavored water, but it is enough to bring people together. Songs rise, some bawdy, some sweet, some so cracked with age they sound like prayers. A woman sings of lost harvest, her voice trembling, but sure, and suddenly the room grows quiet. No minstrel, no lute, just her voice filling the space like candlelight. And you realize this is their luxury, their feast, their carnival. Not abundance, not spectacle, but community. It is not all gentle. Arguments spark laughter. Turns sharp, a shove becomes a fight. A boy sulks when he trips in the dance, only to be dragged back with laughter. Even here, entertainment carries risk. But the danger is smaller, the stakes human-sized. They gamble nothing more than pride, and they lose nothing that cannot be mended with another song. You lean back against the wall of the alehouse, feeling the warmth of the fire seep into your skin. Around you, voices rise and fall, weaving a net of sound that feels older than the walls themselves. The world outside is still cruel plague, famine, taxes, but inside this circle there is music, games, and laughter. For peasants, that is enough. And you realize something. All the great entertainments you've witnessed, tournaments, hunts, feasts, fairs, taverns, jesters, are loud, grand, dangerous. But here among the peasants, entertainment is quiet, simple, and perhaps the most enduring of all. A song sung badly, a game scratched into the dirt, a dance that leaves everyone breathless, that is survival dressed as joy. The fire burns low. The dance slows. One by one, the villagers drift back to their cottages, the children yawning. The fiddler packing away his bow. The square empties, the laughter fades, but the warmth remains. You feel it too, carried in your chest, proof that joy exists even in hardship, that laughter is possible even when the fields are bare. As the night deepens and silence settles over the village, you sense the journey drawing to its close. You have walked through the entertainments of lords and peasants alike, from the roar of tournaments to the hum of songs sung in cottages. And now, as the first pale light of dawn touches the fields, you know it is time to rest, to let the story settle into memory. Ahead lies reflection, the quiet winding down of the tale. The laughter of the fool fades behind you, and the road winds back to the villages where most people lived their short, mud-streaked lives. Here, entertainment is quieter, rougher, but perhaps more honest than the glories of nights or the madness of feasts. You step into the square just as dusk settles, and you see how peasants carve out their joy from scraps of time. A fiddler stands at the center bow, screeching across strings that look one tightening away from snapping. The tune is simple repeating, but it is enough to set feet stomping. Men and women form a circle, skirts flaring, hands, clasped boots kicking up dust. There are no silk favors, no jeweled scarves waved. From balconies, just sweat, mud, and laughter. You join them and you realize the floor isn't polished stone, but bare earth, worn smooth by generations of the same dance. Your shoes are straw thin as parchment, so you kick them off and let your toes sink into the dirt. Somehow it feels freer this way. Children dart between the dancers, shrieking, tossing sticks like swords, turning the dance into a battlefield that no one seems to mind. Dogs bark at the commotion, chickens scatter, and an old man claps offbeat, grinning with a toothless mouth. The fiddler grinds faster, and the circle spins until everyone collapses in a heap of breathless laughter. This is not elegance, it is survival, disguised as rhythm. Games follow. In the dirt, someone scratches the grid of 9 men's Morris. Pebbles serve as pieces, bones as markers, and the players lean forward with the intensity of generals plotting campaigns. You watch one man groan as his line is blocked, his wife clapping her hands in victory. The crowd laughs because here triumph is not measured in castles, but in pebbles. Another group plays with knucklebones, tossing them high, catching them on the backs of their hands, cheering as if they've won the world. The games are simple, but so are the stakes. Pride, laughter, a moment's escape. Sometimes the games grow rougher. Wrestling breaks out in the grass, 2 men grappling until one is pinned in the mud. The crowd roars, cheering as if they've just seen a knight unhorsed. There are no lances, no armor, just bare arms and calloused hands, but the excitement is the same. Someone mentions ball games played with a leather sack stuffed with straw. Entire villages colliding until bones snap and tempers flare. You think of it as medieval soccer, except the goals are vague, the rules non-existent, and the injury rate much higher. Later, you duck into the alehouse. It is smaller than the town tavern, dimmer, but warmer too. The ale is weak, more water than barley, but it carries the comfort of familiarity. Men sit hunched over mugs. Women gossip in the corner. Children drowse against the benches. A song rises, soft off-key but steady. A woman sings of last year's harvest of hunger and hope, her voice weaving through the rafters. Slowly, others join in the harmony, rough but rich. You sip your drink, letting the sound cradle you like a lullaby. Here, ale isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering together. You notice the gossip flowing as easily as drink. Someone swears a cow gave birth to twins, a sign of good luck. Another claims the miller waters down flour and pockets the profit. A third whispers about the reeve's daughter sneaking out at night. The alehouse is half pub, half parliament, where laughter hides truths sharper than swords. And like the jesters in the court, peasants here learn to speak carefully, wrapped in song and jokes, in stories that everyone knows aren't entirely fiction. Festivals bloom even in the countryside. May Day arrives with flowers braided into hair, young men and women leaping over bonfires for luck, couples slipping into the woods under the excuse of gathering greenery. Harvest festivals bring dances that last until dawn, bonfires, roaring mugs overflowing. You watch as men jump through flames, the crowd cheering wildly. It is both ritual and recklessness. If you don't burn your feet, perhaps the fields will be generous next year. Superstition and entertainment blur until you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. And when the festivals end, the family hearth takes over. Inside cottages, smoky with peat, stories unfold. An old woman tells tales of saints and miracles, her voice trembling with age. Children huddle under rough blankets, eyes wide, gasping at devils chased away by holy men, laughing at tricksters outwitted by clever girls. A boy carves a toy from wood, humming a tune while his sister braids straw into a doll. These small rituals stitch the night together, weaving comfort against the cold. It is not grand, it is not gilded, but it is human. And as you sit in the corner listening to the crackle of the fire and the laughter around you, you realize something: this is the heart of entertainment. Not tournaments, not hunts, not carnivals or banquets, but the simple act of people choosing to smile when the world gives them little reason. The fire burns low, the children drift to sleep, and the voices soften into whispers. You step outside the night, cool, the stars sharp above the thatched roofs. The fields stretch dark and endless, but somewhere in the silence you still hear the echo of laughter, faint and stubborn. You breathe it in and you understand joy is never absent. It hides in the dust of dances, in the crack of knuckle bones, in the hum of songs sung badly but with love. And in those moments, peasants found freedom, not grand, not lasting, but real. The journey nears its end. You have seen nobles fight for glory, lords hunt for dominance, priests mocked in carnivals, merchants gamble in taverns, and fools dance for truth. Now you have sat with peasants, felt their laughter, joined their games. And as the dawn rises once more, you feel the story winding down, carrying you toward its closing, toward the quiet reflection that lingers after the last song fades. The village feels quiet now, yet you soon discover there are still more ways peasants made their own fun. By day after the work is done, boys and men gather in the meadow for rough games that look suspiciously like sport but are really controlled chaos. A leather ball, lumpy and uneven, is hurled into the crowd, and suddenly an entire village is chasing it. No rules, no referee, no clear goal except to get the ball anywhere but where it is. It is a glorious mess, more wrestling than running, more bruises than points. You can't help but think this is medieval football, except it's half brawl, half sport, and nobody is entirely sure who wins. The prize, usually a jug of ale, though. Half the players can barely walk home to drink it. Children invent their own versions, chasing pig bladders inflated like balloons, shrieking with laughter until one bursts. They scream, some in delight, some in tears, but the game starts again with whatever they can find. Stones, sticks, a bundle of rags, anything can become a ball if you throw it hard enough. The joy is not in winning, but in running until your sides ache and pretending that play is as important as plowing. Seasonal rituals turn work into entertainment too. At harvest time, singing fills the fields, rough, loud, sometimes out of tune, but powerful enough to keep the rhythm of the scythe steady. Voices rise together, echoing across the stubbled land. The songs are half prayer, half joke, verses about good weather, bad lords, stubborn oxen, and ale waiting at the end of the day. You join in, your voice swallowed by the chorus, and realize that even labor can be disguised as play if everyone sings loudly enough. Winter brings different amusements. Snowball fights erupt, though the snow is packed so hard, it feels more like rocks. Children slide down icy hills on wooden boards, shrieking all the way. Families gather by the hearth, telling ghost stories meant to frighten and delight. You sit among them as an old man tells of spirits haunting crossroads, of witches turning milk sour, of glowing eyes in the woods. The children cling to their mothers, both terrified and thrilled. You smile, knowing that fear itself becomes entertainment when wrapped in story. Music never fades from these moments. Peasants make instruments from whatever they can. Pipes from hollow reeds, drums from stretched animal skin, horns from carved bone. The sounds are raw, often harsh, but they carry across fields and into cottages like threads binding the community together. Someone plays a tune, another stamps in rhythm, and before long, everyone joins. Even the tired, even the hungry, even those who cannot carry a note hum along. Superstition slips into games as well. A boy tosses dice carved from bone, muttering a charm under his breath. A girl leaps over the fire, shrieking with laughter, certain she will dream of her future husband tonight. Others hang herbs above the door before dancing, convinced it will keep away misfortune. To your eyes, it looks like nonsense, but you realize it is not about the charm, it is about hope. When the world feels fragile, rituals become play, and play becomes survival. And sometimes the humor is darker still. Jokes are made about the Lord's taxes, about the reeve's wandering hands, about death itself. At least when the plague comes, someone chuckles, "We won't owe rent anymore." The crowd laughs, the sound a little too sharp, a little too desperate. You understand then, even in their harshest moments, peasants found relief in laughter that dared to poke at suffering. It is gallows humor, yes, but it works. The night deepens. The fire in the village square burns low. The dancers collapse into benches, the children drift into sleep, with sticky fingers from stolen honey cakes. The fiddler's bow finally breaks and he laughs, swearing he'll carve a new one tomorrow. Around you, voices soften into whispers, the air heavy with the smell of smoke bread and tired joy. And you think this is the truest entertainment of all. Not knights charging for glory, not nobles feasting for power, not jesters dancing on the edge of danger, just people weary and poor choosing to laugh anyway. Choosing to sing into the darkness, to dance barefoot in the dirt, to gamble with pebbles instead of gold. Their joys are small, fleeting, fragile, but perhaps more real than anything you have seen so far. The cottages dim, one by one, shutters closing the square, emptying into silence. You stand alone beneath the stars, the echo of songs still humming faintly in the air. Your journey feels complete now. You have seen the diversions of nobles and peasants alike, from tournaments drenched in blood to games carved into wood, from feasts of gilded swans to alehouses of weak beer, from jesters' daring jests to children's rough laughter. The world of medieval entertainment lies behind you, vivid and strange. Ahead waits only quiet reflection, the winding down of the tale, the soft drift into sleep. The road of history lies quiet now. You have walked through tournaments drenched in sweat and blood hunts where falcons screamed through the skies, carnivals where donkeys brayed in churches, and markets where justice was handed out as swiftly as sausages. You have sat through feasts that buried power beneath piles of roasted swans, stumbled into taverns where dice decided destinies, and laughed uneasily with jesters who whispered truths in disguise. Finally, you rested with peasants in their cottages, listening to fiddles stomping in the mud, and learning that even the poorest lives had room for laughter. And so what do these strange entertainments tell you? That human beings, no matter how starved or stuffed, no matter how noble or nameless, have always needed joy. Sometimes it came in the form of violence dressed as sport, sometimes as indulgence hidden in sugar, sometimes as jokes wrapped in danger. But more often it came in small things, a song sung badly, but together a game scratched into the dirt, a story told by firelight. These are the threads that kept the Middle Ages from unraveling completely. Here's the truth: you wouldn't survive a week in their world. The mud, the hunger, the sickness would break you long before the laughter saved you. But perhaps that is why their laughter mattered more, because it was fragile and yet it endured. So as you drift into sleep, carry with you the sound of fiddles in the dark, the smell of bread baking, the warmth of voices rising together. History is not only battles and kings, it is the simple act of finding joy in the shadows. Sweet dreams, traveler. May your night be long and your sleep mercifully warmer than a medieval cottage.